the dynamics that we are seeing more and more within a world of change and a world of difference is a growing era of conflict within the workplace. And we get called in to help organizations both equip leaders to navigate conflict, but also to work with teams who are experiencing conflict. And I think, April, you and I will see often that when people reach out to us for this work, they will describe it as personal conflict, interpersonal conflict. John and Jane are in conflict. They're not getting along. And what we will find often is that it's not necessarily about that Jane doesn't like John or John doesn't like Jane. But when we really peel it back, we find that individuals have different values, different priorities that they bring to the work setting, and that things that often get labeled as interpersonal conflict or this person just doesn't like that person, when we really spend time with different parties or different teams that are experiencing conflict, we find that it's not people, but values.
Yeah, they're clashing.
Yeah. So talk about some of the values I think that we see that
the most.
Yeah.
Which ones do we see the most? I would say one for sure is the autonomy versus collaboration.
Yeah. Okay, some big words here. I know you've got your doctorate, but okay.
I'm going to explain. No, autonomy meaning folks who they're like, I want to work independently. I have a way of doing things that work for me. And they get the service or the product out the door in a timely manner. It exceeds expectations. And I like to work by myself, or I like to manage a project the way I want to manage that project. Versus the folks that are the collaborators who are like, let's check in about everything. Let's have a meeting on Monday and then Wednesday and then Friday morning before we head out. And personally, I'm an autonomy person.
I can tell.
So that drives me nuts. I feel like you're micromanaging me.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be the confusion. That's the clash that's coming through. One person is thinking, hey, I'm being collaborative, I'm being a team player, I'm engaging, and I'm making sure we're staying on track. And the autonomy person or the autonomous style is more like, I feel like you're micromanaging me. I feel like you don't trust me. I feel like you're actually making me have anxiety because I'm not going to be able to get this project or product over the line in the time and fashion I'm used to. And so we see that, but most people never work through their values. Yeah. They never work through their values as teams, which we strongly encourage and do a lot of that work with teams. Another thing we see is not having clearly defined job roles or expectations of the job. So folks will say, oh, this is the job, and and go forth and go on, and you got this. And folks are like, I do not know what I'm supposed to be doing. And now for some folks, depending on personality style, depending on background, even sometimes age and generation, that works. But then you have certain folks that doesn't work for at all. They're confused. I would say we see that generationally a lot, right? So you'll have certain leaders, whether they're baby boomer or even Gen X, so go ahead and figure it out. You got this. We believe in you. And then you'll have Gen Z and young millennials like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is right or wrong. I did step A. I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing, okay, I did A. And baby boomer, Gen X is like, why didn't you do B or C too? Like, why do I have to keep engaging you in this conversation? But a lot of times we have also seen this with organizations that are small and then they are growing. And they, in their mind, there's a denial around change management and growth and what has to happen when you are changing as an organization, that you do have to be more clear because you have more people to lead. And so that's some of the clashes we see a lot.
Yeah, that clarity is so key. And when it doesn't exist, people, again, are making assumptions or going forward just based on their own personal preference, their own personal sense of how things should be.
And we see that with performance management, right? Yeah. So if you're not clear, you have inequitable outcomes and disparate outcomes for performance management. So you'll see, why is this person over here getting away with what seems like everything. They out here living their best life. And you're like, and then this other person's like, well, I just got written up about this. Like, I just got a warning and they do this. And so it's, and you'll see leaders, we've had leaders buck like, well, no, they should know. And they can, and you're like, but they don't.
Yeah.
They don't. Like,
Yeah.
that's great, but the average person they don't work well like that.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is you do see a disparate outcome in treatment with employees, even if that's not the leader's intention. And they are like, how did this happen? It's because it's not clear to folks.
I think we see too that in communication styles, for instance, you have a more direct communication style that culturally, your background, just your wiring, you like direct communication.
Yes, I do.
And in some organizations or with some individuals, they prefer a softer approach, more words.
Especially in the Pacific Northwest.
Especially in the Pacific Northwest.
It's a lot of words. I'll leave it at that. I was going to say not always the actions, but a lot of words. And I'm like, we're having a lot of words at TED Talks, but we're not moving. And so, yes.
Yeah. But again, for you, if you're in a work environment, to be able to also adjust and adapt for the person that.
Yes, I admit. Yeah. So because respect is two ways.
Yeah.
And so it's not about you just respecting me or letting me bring who I am to work. I also have to let you bring who you are to work. And so I have to be able to adapt. And you've seen me adapt when I'm like, okay, this person can't receive this directness as well, right? There's always a question you hear me ask, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?
Yeah.
And sometimes my directness is not going to help me be effective. Yeah. So I have to back in or reverse engineer it, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, if I just had my preference, I'd rather people be clear, and I want to be also clear here. Being clear or direct doesn't mean being rude. Mm-hmm. That's it. They're not synonymous. You don't. Right. You can be clear, direct, not rude.
Right.
And in fact, I think it's disrespectful when you're not clear and direct, kindly, but then just say, well, I didn't want to be rude. So there's two sides of that, right? And
it's funny you use the word rude too, because I think, oftentimes within conflict, when these values are at play, people have told themselves a story. Yeah. Like, ooh, April asked me a question about this. That was rude, or I'm interpreting it that way. Because we also see one of those values, particularly with Gen X, my generation or other generations, they really place a high value on title and role. And, I've earned this. I'm dare I say, I'm the boss. And we see, again, with differences in the organization or different styles, a lot of employees and newer employees will want context. They want to know the why. They want to have an understanding of, why am I being asked to do this? What's it for? And why did the organization choose to do it this way? Maybe there is a better way. And we find sometimes that even something as basic as those questions get interpreted as a questioning of authority. And within a certain generation, when I started in the workforce, we didn't ask why. We just did the thing that we were asked to do. And so, again, just these differences of work values can then create a dynamic where people feel like they're in interpersonal conflict, but really what they're in the midst of is just a conflict of work values that, if talked about, if understood, if made explicit even before a conflict happens, can really help an organization navigate that difference more effectively.
Agreed.